Welcome back to the first trade. Negotiators in Washington are getting a little more time to work out a stimulus deal ahead of the election. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is signaling progress and let a deadline slip, even though there's no deal yet. Let's bring in Bill Lee, chief economist at the Milken Institute. Bill, good to see you this morning. How, in your estimation, how desperately is stimulus needed right now?
Well, as far as the general economy is concerned, it's doing quite well. The rebound is in play. Trouble is, it's not even. A lot of people are suffering, especially in the leisure, hospitality, and transportation industry. There's a lot of people who are suffering, and they need to get that relief. So the thing that we need is a targeted fiscal package. And I think the debate right now is about how targeted really means.
Bill, do you think we're headed towards a double dip recession?
That's very unlikely because I think the damage to the economy has been to specific sectors, and I think the vibrancy of our economy is sufficient to allow businesses to change their business models so that if we go to more remote kind of transactions, it seems like a lot of businesses are ready to do that. Some of the sectors, like the restaurants and the people-to-people facing sectors, those are the businesses that are having a hard time and they need the relief. But a double dip economy is very unlikely because a lot of the production and a lot of the services are already gearing themselves for a post-COVID environment.
Bill, should the next stimulus package be very targeted? And if so, who are you targeting? There are so many different industries out there desperately in need of help. We talk to them all the time, the restaurant industry, the airline industry, frontline workers, you name it. So how do you even begin to target something like this?
Yeah, there's a set of criteria that most economists think about. In fact, Mohamed El-Erian, who's a frequent guest on your show and was on at the Milken Global Conference just last week, and you can find that session on the Milken Conference that I moderated. He said that a good fiscal package should provide immediate relief to those who are in distress, the people who are unemployed, the businesses that are about to go out of business. It should provide a level of certainty so that people don't have the gnawing pain and agony that there's an uncertain future ahead of them. It should also incentivize businesses to shift their production models so that they adapt to the new environment. And finally, it really has to be one where the economic goals are coordinated with the health policies. We haven't seen a fiscal package do all that. It seems as though health policy is set to let's just minimize the number of occurrences of COVID cases, and economic policy is let's just toss money out there. The Fed and the fiscal authorities are guilty of tossing money out there without directing it properly to satisfy the criteria of providing direct relief to the unemployed waiters and waitresses, to provide the restaurants with the incentives to say, hey, let's try to do some more takeouts. Let's try to have ghost kitchens set up. Let's specialize in certain types of deliveries that people can enjoy at home. So doing that kind of reshifting of the economy is something that hasn't been thought about sufficiently, and that's where the failure of monetary fiscal policy really sits.
Bill, another $1,200 check being mailed out to U.S. households. How impactful would that be?
If it went to an unemployed person, someone who just can barely make the rent, that would be phenomenally impactful and important. If it goes to Mike Milken or billionaires, that would be a total waste. And I think that's where we really need to have a more targeted distribution system where people there are criteria, income criteria and unemployment criteria for the recipients of the aid. And by the way, that hasn't been discussed at all in Congress. It seems as though they're just interested in shoveling money out the door.
Right. I mean, we've talked here about, the fact that businesses are not going to be able to get back to anything truly sustainable until we get the virus under control. So what is the government's role at this point? Is it just to continually dig deeper into their pockets to basically gift people money, these bridge grants, if you will, until we're back on our feet?
No, in fact, that's exactly the wrong way to go. As I said, the design of the distribution network has to be where the Fed, instead of tossing liquidity out to the banking system and hoping the banks give to the right people, should incentivize. We have a lot of specialists out in the industry where private equity investors and venture capitalists, the SPACs that are growing all over the place, they're all looking for businesses that are going to be viable in the post-COVID economy or to convert successful businesses into businesses that will be successful. And it takes equity share to do that. You can't just lend somebody money and say, make sure you give me that money back and don't do anything that you haven't done before. you need experimentation and you need the possibility of failure. And that really is a role for equity finance. Letting banks do that kind of liquidity distribution is exactly the wrong way to go. So we should change the regulatory system to allow more of the venture capitalists and equity financing to allow businesses to propose new business ideas that will thrive in the post-COVID environment. Same thing with fiscal policy. We need checks to go to people who are unemployed, cannot make the rent, but it cannot go to people who are just going to put it in the bank because they already have a steady paycheck, like a lot of our congressional workers and a lot of the people in government. They get paid whether they're working at home or they're working in the office. Those people should get either a much reduced distribution of checks or no distribution at all.
Bill, should senators, Republican senators concerned about the deficit, should they just shut up? Because just listening to you, it makes it sound like we need stimulus and that's more important.
Well, we need the right distribution of stimulus. And now let's talk about the size. This is exactly the wrong time to worry about the size of the deficit, whether and the amount of debt that the government is issuing, whether the debt becomes 100% of GDP or 150% of GDP. This is a one-time blip. Once the virus is under control, it's unlikely that the government is going to be spending the same amount unless the government makes the mistake of putting money into entitlement programs or expanding entitlements that will permanently raise the deficit. That, again, comes back to my point of the composition of spending is vitally important. The relief that we need is supposed to be temporary relief because disaster is a temporary disaster. We cannot wind up funding programs that will last forever. That is what the Republicans are most afraid of. And we need assurances in order to pass the package that we will not be funding more entitlements or expanding the entitlement universe.
All right, let's leave it there. Bill Lee, Chief Economist at the Milken Institute. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.